My day started out, as usual, stumbling around because I am not a morning person. And I got up out of my tent, wandered over to a sagebush, and what I found was a rattlesnake. And he was all coiled up, and he had 9 buttons on his rattle. And he looked at me, and I was shocked to see him, and he slid into the middle of a sagebrush. So this was a Western rattlesnake. And Dan and I had already declared today our reptile day. So it started out at 7 something with a Western rattlesnake. After breakfast, we headed out into the desert near a place called Domingo Pass. And what we found was phenomenal. We just got out of the rig, walked a few feet, and here was a Great Basin Whiptail Lizard. And the Great Basin Whiptail Lizard is a serious predator. And they kind of walk in a herky-jerky fashion. They go one way, stop, sit, look around, study everything, and then they go another direction. And if they sense danger, they will get up on their big hind feet and jet. They are so fast, and you will never catch them. But this animal that we found, he was curious what was going on, and Dan got some incredible footage of this beautiful lizard. They had black and white checkering along their flanks, and this one was probably 9 inches long, 10 inches. Then we found leopard lizards. Leopard lizards are super fast, but they are afraid of the human form. So the trick is to get down on your knees or down on your stomach, and they suddenly lose the fear of you, and you can get very close and photograph them. Leopard lizards are unique because the female, when she has young, has big, bright orange dots down her flank, and the males don't have that. And they eat rodents, they eat other lizards, they eat big insects, they will even eat baby birds, and they are a serious predator. And then the other one we saw was a Western fence lizard. And Western fence lizards belong to a large family of lizards in Western North America. But the Western fence lizard is found across many habitats, but always in arid, dry sites. So these lizards are super important because they control insect numbers, rodent numbers, and they are the prey base for many mammalian predators that hunt them. So lizards are truly an amazing family of animals. I look at lizards as absolutely time-consuming, and they are worth your investment to read up on them and go see them. But don't catch them. You don't have to pick them up. When you pick up a lizard, you leave your scent on that lizard, and that opens them up to predation by mammals like skunks, coyotes, badgers. They will all eat that lizard. So don't pick them up. Just look at them. They are absolutely beautiful. We are now down in Southeast Oregon, and yesterday, we stayed around Cottonwood Creek and saw a lot of incredible landscape. This is a vast, vast desert out here. It is thousands of square miles, millions and millions of square acres of desert. And it's very, very important to understand that this millions of acres of desert is not wasteland. It is not property to be discarded or to be destroyed or to be overgrazed. It has a purpose. And it is the home to many hundreds of species of animals and plants. We had scorpions. We had a member of the scorpion family that was well over 3 inches long and glowed under UV light, just looked like he was gonna light up the whole universe. Just absolutely beautiful. These very large scorpions that we were finding were banded and a good 3.5 inches long, huge thick tail with a big stinger, and they were super aggressive. And they were very aware of our movements. And as we would move towards them, they would put their pincers up, they would put their tail up over the top of their head, and they were ready to do battle. The smaller scorpions that we find all over the desert areas of the Pacific Northwest are never that aggressive, never. But these large scorpions were extremely aggressive. So that was very interesting. Scorpions are the primary prey base of a lot of mammals, like skunks. All kinds of rodents eat them, and they get grabbed by birds. Screech owls, burrowing owls, all eat scorpions. So when we started seeing these great big scorpions, you can understand why these birds and mammals would feed on them, because they are full of fat and they're a good-sized arachnid. So on our way south, we came across shorebirds. In the Pacific Northwest, shorebird migration starts about the 19th of June. And these are sandpipers that breed in the Arctic and start their southward movement into South America and other parts of the world for the North American winter. The specific species that we saw were black-necked stilt, which breeds all across eastern Oregon and Washington. Absolutely beautiful bird with bubblegum pink legs, black and white body, and they're named a stilt for a very good reason, because they look like they're on these pink pickup stick legs, long legs. Black-necked stilts are pickers. They pick insects off the surface of the water and off mud. The other shorebird that we saw, several Wilson's phalarope. And Wilson's phalaropes are one of the most unique shorebirds in all of the world, because it is the female that is brilliant and bright and promiscuous. She travels around, she lays the eggs on the nest. The drab, dull male then incubates the eggs and raises the young, while Mrs. is off with another male, establishing another nest. Phalaropes start their migration about the 5th of July, and by the 10th or 12th of July, there are saline lakes in the western North America that will have 100,000 Wilson's phalaropes on them. And some of those are just south of us. One of them is Lake Abert, which is near Paisley, Oregon, and the other one is Mono Lake in Central California. So these vast saline systems host an invertebrate called a brine shrimp. And they also have millions of salt flies along the shoreline. And that's what phalarope feed on, because it allows them to have a huge intake of fat, which allows for them to survive their migration. And they migrate clear down into Central America. Phalaropes are truly amazing because they also do something else, and that is that they spin around in shallow water and create a vortex. And this vortex sucks invertebrate insect larvae up to the surface, and the phalaropes pick them off the water. So by spinning around and around, they create this dust devil, only it's underwater, and it draws all these insects up, and that's what they eat. So phalaropes are a truly amazing bird, and they gather in massive numbers, huge numbers. So if you have an opportunity to visit Lake Abert, north of Lakeview, Oregon, and Mono Lake in late July, you'll be truly blown away. These numbers will just cause you to be in awe. It's one of the great events in the natural world. Another shorebird that also comes into the area is the white-faced ibis. White-faced ibis generally are not found north of Seneca, Oregon, and they are uncommon in eastern Washington. So on our trip down, we found one west and north of John Day, Oregon, in a wet field. which is really unusual. I've been traveling that road for over 40 years and have never seen a white-faced ibis in that area. And lo and behold, here's this beautiful white-faced ibis. You never know what you're going to find and where migrant birds will show up. So July is known as the post-breeding wandering period, and that lasts clear into the end of July and into August. And then August is the beginning of the massive songbird migration south into Central and South America. These are migratory months. And as I said earlier, shorebirds have been migrating since early June out of the Arctic, and they are coming through here as well. Today, as we were driving up Domingo Pass, we came across an absolutely beautiful desert sparrow called a black-throated sparrow. Black-throated sparrows are migrant, and they arrive here in late April in southeast Oregon. Black-throated sparrows nest in sagebrush and also sarcobatus or creosote bush. They also like hop sage. But black-throated sparrows are absolutely beautiful. They're eye-catching. And they have a beautiful, beautiful song. They are an insectivore during the spring and summer, and they also eat lots of seeds in the fall and during the winter when they are way to the south of us. Black-throated sparrows do not spend the fall or the winter here in the Northwest. Some years they arrive in large numbers, and other years they're very, very difficult to find. So it was very nice to find this family. They had 2 adults and a young one with them. And they were still on their, what I would call their territory there. But it was fun to see them. Black-throated sparrows also are subject to predation by all kinds of things. And one of the things that hunts them are the reptiles that we saw today. If a chick falls out of the nest, leopard lizards would grab it and eat it in a heartbeat. Leopard lizards are a serious predator to lots of different small animals. But black-throated sparrows have learned to deal with them and snakes by being very, very aggressive themselves. And as leopard lizards approach a nest area, the adult black-throated sparrow comes after them and does not give up, is very persistent in its attacks on that reptile. Another bird that we saw today were chukar. Chukar is a partridge from Central Asia. They are not native to the Northern America, but they were introduced about 1909 in Washington and Oregon. They are a desert species, and chukars love steep slopes with big rocks. And they are extremely vocal. And so when they have young this time of year, they're always directing the young. And they don't care who hears them. They often go down to water during the extreme hot time of the day. Usually about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they head for water. And you can hear them coming, you can hear them there, and you can hear them going back up the mountainside. So chukar are extremely beautiful, but extremely loud. They have large numbers of young. They can have 12 to 14 young, and they hatch these huge numbers of young. Another bird that we saw today was the Swainson's hawk. Now, when I first started coming to this area, we never saw Swainson's hawks, never. But something has changed here around Domingo Pass and the Pueblos. And east of the Pueblo Mountains, there are large tracts of agriculture. Swainson's hawks love agriculture, especially alfalfa fields. And that is what is being grown out here in the bottom of this desert valley with center pivot irrigation systems. So Swainson's hawks have learned that with well-watered alfalfa comes huge numbers of rodents. And so they arrive to hunt rodents. And this particular pair was nesting in low cottonwood trees along Cottonwood Creek, and they feed on the rodents in the alfalfa fields that have just sprung up over the last 2 or 3 years. So because of the change in that habitat and the use of unbelievable amounts of water, these rodent numbers have exploded. And Swainson's hawks are here to eat and benefit from the large number of mice in the area. One other animal that is in the area are also black-tailed jackrabbits. And we saw evidence of them everywhere today. And it is always a question in my mind, what happens to jackrabbits when agriculture moves into an area and starts growing crops like alfalfa? Because jackrabbits can't get enough of alfalfa. So you always wonder about the populations of jackrabbits, what's going to happen to them. I can tell you what happened to them in eastern Washington. They were obliterated. There are no jackrabbits in southeastern Washington. They are now extirpated, gone forever. Today, as we drove up into Domingo Pass in the Pueblo Mountains, we came across an 1880s stage stop. This old building sits out in this sage flat high in the Pueblo Mountains, and it kind of lends an atmosphere to the area. This atmosphere testifies to the early history and the willingness of people to take a chance and live here. This area is a high desert, and in the winter it is extremely cold, and in the summer it can be extremely hot. Today was 98 degrees and windy, and these people that settled these areas experienced all of this extreme weather. So this old stage stop sits out there in this big, broad, flat area of sagebrush. And other than that building, there is no evidence that humans had ever been there. Nature had come in, grown back over, and completely obliterated our previous existence here. As you look at that building, think about what it took for those people to survive here. They had to be tough folks to be able to survive. And many of them did not survive here. They either left or they died. And so when we find old historical sites like this, we are always amazed that these old buildings, like this one right here, survive. Because these are hundreds. This one right here is in excess of 140 years old, which is amazing for the Western United States. But it survives because people have left it alone, and it is in a desert. And there are fewer and fewer people in desert areas. More and more people are recreating in desert areas. And hopefully this building and buildings like the old stage stop will be left alone and not vandalized or messed with. We are here on the eastern slope of the Pueblo Mountains at the mouth of Van Horn Creek. This is a cold water, freshwater stream that comes down out of the Van Horn Basin, which is up in the middle of the Pueblo Mountains. This area that I am standing on is the beginning of a geologic formation that was created by this stream flooding. And so in spring floods or intense rainstorms, it bursts its bank and carries down all kinds of debris from its channel coming through the mountains. And it deposits this vast area. And in this area are massive boulders that were swept by water down this channel, and they're now deposited all over out here on this huge fan that's out here. The amazing thing about this area is that this is a east-facing slope, and these soils here are mostly rock and gravel. So what is growing here are a community of sagebrush, along with Great Basin prickly pear cactus, which is a cactus we do not have in eastern Washington. And we also found hedgehog cactus here, which is a small, round, kind of a miniature type cactus you will sometimes find in plant stores. Hedgehog cactus are native to this area, as is the Great Basin prickly pear. Prickly pear cactus blooms into May, middle of May, and gets pollinated, and after the petals drop off those flowers, it forms a pear. And that's why it's called prickly pear. And this pear turns green, and then it expands and grows, and eventually it turns purple. And it is very edible. Lots and lots of people eat prickly pear. Wildlife loves prickly pear, and it's eaten by all kinds of rodents and deer, and you name it, they eat it. The other thing that's very interesting about this place is the riparian area to my left here and behind me. This is a very narrow, thin margin of wet soil species. And right here I'm looking at red osier dogwood and willow, and there's scattered cottonwood trees. And these plants can only sustain themselves by having their roots in water. And so in this desert that probably gets no more than 10 or 11 inches of moisture in any given year, and sometimes many years less than that, 6 to 8 inches of precip. So this riparian area is extremely important to the wildlife of this fan and the stream channel coming through the mountain, because it provides thermal cover in the winter and in the summer against the heat of the summer. Today it's supposed to crank up to 98 degrees, so it's going to be extremely warm today. The birds and the wildlife that are sustained by this water coming down through here and across this alluvial fan are sustained throughout the year by the water. The valley that this comes out of, it's a bowl up in the middle of the Van Horn Basin, or in the middle of the Pueblo Mountains, is wet, has loads of springs and melting snow. So these mountains are 8,000 feet, and we're sitting at about 3,200 feet right here. But it is an area that is just alive. And were you to stand here in the evening and early in the morning, you would see all kinds of wildlife moving around here. As it gets warmer and warmer, many animals seek cover, and many of them go into those thick riparian buffer areas. And that makes riparian buffers super important, because it protects the water, keeps the temperature of the water very low, and sustains loads and loads of species of wildlife. Another thing that we found here was the introduction of non-native, highly invasive species. We found knapweed growing here, we found crested wheatgrass growing here, and these are species introduced from Asia, not native to North America. But they grow in arid areas in the Asian continent, and they do very well here. There are some native species that benefit from these non-native invasives being here. And one of those are our native bumblebees, which utilize the knapweed blossoms to collect pollen and nectar. Knapweed grows in thick stands. And what happens is they completely dominate a site. None of our native plants can outcompete knapweed. I found this ugly little patch down here, and in reality, if you were unaware of what it was, you'd think, what beautiful flowers. But in fact, it's highly injurious to the shrub steppe community, the native sage community that's here. Another amazing thing that we witnessed last night was the Neowise comet. This comet was just off the bucket of the Big Dipper, and it has a huge tail, and it's traveling off who knows where into the universe. But it's here visiting Earth right now. It's never been here that we are aware of, but it's on a circuit, and who knows when it will return. But this beautiful big comet was seen last night. The night was dark. There was no moon. It was the new moon, and it was pitch black. and the Milky Way came up, and it was so bright it looked like it was illuminating the earth. And Dan was able to get some astounding photos of the Milky Way over the Pueblo Mountains, which is just absolutely gorgeous. So these vast desert areas allow for astronomical observation. They allow for the home of all kinds of relationships between animals and plants and animals and animals. And these animals survive in this very, very harsh, hot place during the summer months because they're out in the evening and at night.